Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Building a First Gen Community presentation. My name is Mark Counterman. I am an academic and pre-health advisor at Penn State University Park and a first-generation college graduate of Penn State, and I will be your facilitator today. I want to remind you that today's session is being recorded and will be available on the Whova platform for 3 months following today's event. Today's presentation is in the Zoom webinar format. This means that microphones and cameras of attendees are turned off. The Q&A and chat features are available on the Whova platform as well. Questions will be addressed towards the end of the session, as well as they'll probably be answered throughout the presentation. Whova is in a separate window than the session, and we're going to be monitoring it throughout. Don't forget to engage in the community activities on the Whova platform as well, such as the discussion boards and things like that. As a reminder, you can enable closed captioning at the bottom of your Zoom window at any time. Today's presentation is being hosted by Patty Klug, Director of the Chaiken Center for Student Success in the Penn State College of Liberal Arts, as well as Nicole Heitzenrader and Michelle Kankar. And I will pass it away to Patty.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks everyone for attending today. I'll just say a little bit about myself, and then I'll let my counterparts also introduce themselves. So I am the director of the Chaiken Center for Student Success in the College of Liberal Arts at University Park. And the Chaiken Center is about 1.5 years old, and I've been at Penn State for about 1.5 years as well. I am first gen, and I come from multiple experiences in supporting students, basically over 25 years in higher ed. And so it's been just a joy to establish this new center. And I'm looking forward to sharing with all of you today what we've been up to. So with that, I'll hand it off to Nicole.
Hi, I'm Nicole. I'm a project associate for the Digital Pedagogy and Initiatives Office with the Liberal Arts College at Penn State. And I did a lot of work with Patty as she developed the FYS course we're going to talk about a little bit, and the mentorship program late this summer throughout fall. I recently graduated with my master's from Penn State, and I've been working here since about 2 years ago now. So I was really excited to get into this as well. And I recently learned I'm also first gen. So that makes my investment in this a little bit more interesting. Michelle?
Hi, my name is Michelle Kankar, and I'm a first generation student. I'm majoring in criminology and minoring in sociology, and I'm also a pre-law student, so I'm going to be attending law school in the fall. I'm also a peer success coach at the Chaiken Center for Student Success. So I've been working one-on-one with Patty since the inauguration of the center in fall 2021. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Okay, we will get started. I will share my presentation. All right, so as we said, we introduced ourselves a little bit. This presentation is really about sharing our experience in establishing both a first year cohort of scholars that are primarily first gen, and integrating a component of mentorship. So we're going to be talking about a lot of themes that have already come up today, even in the keynote this morning with Adriana Lacey. So it will be great to kind of share how these intersections have come together in this program. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we started, how we're doing, where we're going. The Chaiken Center was a new initiative in the fall of 2021, and it's primarily driven by the dean and our lovely donors, Roz and Jean Chaiken, who have been supporting students with scholarships for a while now, for over a decade. But really what they came together with our dean to come to an idea to support all the students in the College of Liberal Arts, and with still a special care for our Chaiken Scholars. So we serve all students in the college. We're in Sparks 138 and 139 on the same floor as our other student services. And as you'll learn today, we have peer success coaches that work with students for all sorts of reasons and plugging them into resources. The Chaiken Scholarship, we choose students every year. It started as a way of recruiting students, admitted students, and we are still doing that by offering a significant financial scholarship based on financial need, academic achievement, and other markers like first gen. And we've really increased the numbers of first generation students into our scholar cohort. In 2022, 2023, our numbers increased from a first year class of 25 scholars to over 40 scholars. 34 of those 40 were first gen students, 33 out of the 40 were students of color. And so this made, thinking about first generation, I was lucky to think about how I already had a captured audience and how could I use this cohort as sort of a foundation for building a bigger first generation community. And the other thing that was important to me is to create something that was relational in the center rather than transactional. And that's why I think mentorship also became a part of it. One other thing I will say was also a vision of the Chaikens for the scholars to know one another. And it derives from a story of Jean Chaiken, who showed up at a reception that they hold every fall for the scholars. And scholars would show up and they'd be roommates, but they didn't know that they were scholars. And they really wanted them to know one another and become a community. And so this is very much in the spirit of the center and the spirit of what we're trying to do with first generations beyond even the scholars. So the Chaiken Center for Student Success, students can drop by any day. We're open into the evening, and we have peer success coaches like Michelle, who have been trained to work with students around time management, organizations, study skills. We work with our other partners in advising and career enrichment, so they've been trained around resume review, also helping students navigating all of our different software systems at Penn State and in the college. And also another emphasis for me is having students explore opportunities outside of the classroom and get those kind of funding opportunities they need, and just exploration about how they can pursue what they want to do. So the peer success coaches were hired first before I even thought about all of these other things you're going to learn about today. And they happen to all be first generation students, and they all happen to be Chaiken Scholars, somewhat by accident. So when I put out the call for these peer success coaches, these were the 6 students that floated to the top of the best of the best. And so these were the first 6 peer success coaches that I hired at the center. And as I said, we trained, and I started thinking about this incoming class of 40 or more scholars and how they might need extra support, and also how we want to create a community. And I saw it as an opportunity that, along with some mechanisms we had already started in the college around first year seminars. So I thought it made really a lot of sense to take these peer success coaches who had been working in the center already for a couple months in the spring of 2022 and integrate them into the program for the first year cohort. So the coaches were mentors in a 1-credit first year seminar. So we have an LA 83 in the College of the Liberal Arts. And this was sort of an offshoot that was specifically designed for Chaiken Scholars with certain things in mind. One, to integrate the experiences of other Chaiken Scholars. So we had current students come and speak and be resources. So we had students speak about student leadership in an organization, a student speak about how to get funding for study abroad, a student speak, actually an alumni speaker who is in graduate school, who's a Chaiken Scholar. All 3 of those students were first generation students, our first generation students. And so that was always a bonus, is that we had that added identity that kept coming through. So it was always top of mind, although not every student in the class was first generation. We could still address those kinds of needs and transition kinds of themes that we could get at through this class. And the mentors were really brought on to be an essential part of that as well. And they were able to address specific transition kinds of challenges through different means. We had a discussion board, which we'll talk about in just a second. And they were able to answer questions real time. They would meet with their mentors. Some of the mentors came to class with me on a weekly basis. And so they developed those relationships. And because they were all first generation, there was a lens for that first gen. So one of my passions with this whole project is some intended outcomes that I would like to see. And I will talk about a little bit about how we're trying to assess these things as we build this program and then we build out from this program. But one has always been a sense of belonging in terms of community and feeling like Penn State is your home. The Chaiken Scholars is one sort of built-in community, but it had never been more than just a line on their scholarship. So what I really wanted to do is build it in as part of their identity, and then also bring to them the identity of first generation, so they could start feeling like these were things that other students were and that they could relate to other students. And I want to bring back in, our donor had some really insightful things. They received thank you letters from the students. And they always said if they could get to know one another, it would be so amazing because they come from similar backgrounds. And we all know this working with these group of students that they do. And so that was really insightful on the donor's part to say, let's get these students together to know one another because they could be helpful to one another. And then the other thing was what I'm really passionate about is early awareness of resources related to career, internships, undergraduate research, graduate school, and education abroad. What we know is students for postgraduate success need these things in their portfolio. They need to be having these experiences. And I know that it's more complicated than just getting the resource. So one of the things that we've been able to do is look for those sources of funding as well to continue giving them the resources they need to actually do some of these experiences. So in the class, we were able to do some community building, and we had different activities. This is from a scavenger hunt that we had as part of the class. And so the mentors met up with their mentees to do different things like go to a library open house, to go to our liberal arts fair that we have every fall, to go see where the different offices were actually located. And so it was kind of a dual purpose thing that they were getting to know one another. And they were also getting to know the resources in the college. And so I tried to build in things like that in the course in which they had to interact with each other and do things together. And again, the mentors were essential in getting that done. Each week, the mentor was asked to at least reach out in one way, whether that was our discussion board, a group me chat, a text, meet in person, to continually be involved in these students in these students' transition. And so these were some of the ways in which we did it. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle and let her talk a little bit about what, as a mentor, what she did and what her impressions of the program were.
Okay, yeah, so I want to specifically talk about like Patty said, the experiences that we had as mentors and how we kept mentees like involved with us throughout last semester and this semester. So first, kind of what we did in the course was engage in discussion boards and have like formal and informal communications to the discussion boards, like talking about professional things, but also kind of like their interests, so we could get to know them better and really understand like what their needs are as students. So that kind of allowed for different conversations to come about. And then we also did the team building activities like the scavenger hunts. I personally did some activities with my mentees last semester because of the seasons that were going on. So like Christmas, Halloween, so events associated with that, so we can get to know each other on a more personal basis. But every single peer success coach has a different way of doing this. It really depends on the group of students that you have and each student's individual needs. So some of us might have met one-on-one with them every week or every 2 weeks. but at least keeping a virtual connection once a week was really important to us. Then meeting in person was more based on the student. So because of this, a lot of the mentees have expressed that they feel really comfortable having a peer as their mentor, because a lot of us are connected through the same classes, or we've taken classes since we're older and we're able to show them like, hey, you can take this class, or, you know, have this experience. So we have a lot of connections through there. And they just have told me personally, my mentees have told me how relatable we can be, because, you know, we're going through the same thing at the same time. So because of this, about 20 out of the 40 mentees have kept in touch during the spring, since it is only a 1 semester course. The following semester's kind of, you know, unsure of how the turnout might be with the students. So at the beginning of the semester, we really made it clear to them that we're still a resource until, you know, whenever, you know, it doesn't really end at any point. We're always going to be their mentors. So like I said, about 20 out of 40 have kept in touch. And once again, each relationship is a little bit different, but overall, there has been a good response from our mentees, because they really feel connected to us, more like almost a friendship. But I'll kind of get into that a little bit more later, because in terms of how we've grown as mentors and as peer success coaches, it's helped us build a different level of professionalism, and we've developed better communication skills with the students, because although we can be friends, we're also still mentors, and, you know, we're peer success coaches. So there needs to be a level of professionalism involved. So it's really helped me and the other peer success coaches really have a new level of understanding of how to interact with students and have that connection that's not so formal like a professor, but not so informal like a best friend. So that's my take on that. And then lastly, I wanted to touch on something that one of the other peer success coaches mentioned. Yeah, something that she mentioned was that we equally have grown from this experience as much as the mentees have grown. Like, we both have learned a lot and gotten the chance to like overcome different barriers and things, like, you know, and getting to know them and identifying their needs as a student. So yeah.
So when Patty came to the Office of Digital Pedagogy and Initiatives, I had the opportunity to work with her when it came to finalizing this course on Canvas and to finalize what she wanted out of the mentorship program. So we knew right away that we wanted the mentors to be as ingrained in these first year students' first year experience as possible. And we knew early that we wanted them to be able to interact in discussions within Canvas in the course. So we set them up as students in Canvas. And that way we could have them be discussion leaders. The only difference is they don't receive grades, obviously, because they're not taking the class. But if their mentees have a question about an assignment or something, they have the ability to go in and check in on anything that their mentees can see on Canvas. So we use the discussion boards as kind of like an introduction to interacting and communicating with your mentor groups. And about once a week, we wanted them to interact in some kind of discussion on Canvas. And those discussions could be centered around something mentioned in class. If there was a speaker that came to class, it could be about that. Maybe it's something that they noticed their mentees have been struggling with across the board. It could really be about anything, as long as it is productive and helping them in their first year transition. And looking back on the discussion boards, we definitely would make some changes. We've found that the most successful communication between the mentors and mentees didn't necessarily happen in Canvas. These discussion groups kind of made way for them to start communicating through apps like GroupMe or meeting in person and making study groups, or some of them even exchanged numbers to text outside of the classroom. but it seems the discussion board started to die off a little bit towards the end of the semester. Yeah. Okay, so towards the end of, sometimes my brain moves faster than my eyes do. Anyway, towards the end of the semester, we created 2 surveys. One was administered to the mentors and one was administered to the first-year students. And this was just to gauge if there were any immediate red flags in the course or the mentorship program that should be changed before the next round of students experienced it. So the mentor survey, of course, it was smaller because there were fewer mentors, but we got some good insights. All of the mentors agreed that the first year was successful of the mentorship program. And there was really only one theme that I really saw them bringing up, and it was things that could be added to the course to help students for their first year. They wanted reinforced study habits throughout the course, roommate conflict resolution, and a crash course on how to use Canvas. And as Michelle said, everyone in the survey showed interest in wanting to remain mentors and keep in touch with their mentees. As for the student survey, students shared that they would like to learn more about internships, and most of them had concerns about financial factors of college. Yeah, you can go to the next slide. Some highlights that we gathered from the student survey, student favorites. They kind of center around the more social aspects of the course and mentorship. Overall, everyone really enjoyed having access to a mentor and meeting Chaiken Scholars. I think especially coming out of a COVID college world, having those connections to have almost ready-made friends to transition into college really seemed to ease some social anxieties and some, I guess, adjustment into their first few weeks of college. Their least favorite part of the course was a book that they read throughout the whole semester called Atomic Habits, that was just centered around teaching them how to create sustainable, healthy habits to get them through their college career. But I will say the ones that liked this book really liked it. I think it just comes down to how students enjoy receiving information. If it's used next year, it might be the favorite thing. It's hard to tell. Most useful information is how to access campus resources and time management and study skills, which I thought was interesting since the mentors wanted that more reinforced. But I guess like that's such an, I guess, a useful skill to work into as many lessons as you can throughout the FYS course. They also found that self-advocacy and health wellness was a useful thing to keep on the forefront going into college, which is something that I wouldn't have guessed they would say, but very interesting to learn nonetheless. Most helpful part of having a mentor, again, kind of ties back to the social needs of a college student, having the opportunity to connect with peers and sharing experiences about college. Once again, seeing those social anxieties be eased by a mentorship program. Now, send it off to Patty if there's anything else she'd like to add on that.
No, I think you did a nice job. I think I try to have an eye to assessing as much as I can to get feedback from students about what's working, what's not. And I think there was some consistent things that came across and about that mentorship being very important. Now, that didn't mean necessarily that every student that was assigned a mentor, that was an immediate connection or that they even leveraged that as much as they could or should. You know, we talked about that this morning in the keynote session in our small groups in terms of, you know, that secret sauce to get all students to engage. However, the thing is that we had more students engaging than if we had not had the course and we had not had the mentors. I will say that even if they may not have connected with their mentor, the center or myself was another resource. And one of the things I would like to say is to give students as many possible routes to support as they possibly can and as many routes to mentorship. So as I'm going forward, I'm thinking about not only the Chaiken Scholars, but building it up for all of our first generation students in the college, and doing some of the same things as we go forward in terms of assessing, identifying needs, connecting them to resources in order to build a community and provide resources. So far, we have put out an assessment a couple times to our first generation students in different events that we've had. And one of my favorite questions is, how has being a first generation student impacted your college experience so far? Not surprising, yet I feel like affirming. Sometimes we think that, you know, our community or Penn State is different than every place else. And it's important to hear from our students and share with our counterparts and our colleagues that students are feeling this way. So, you know, things like, it's harder for me to know about different opportunities and make connect since I have to start from nothing. I lack a lot of knowledge about opportunities available or that exist. I'm struggling to figure out how to invest my time and how to make sure that what I'm doing is not a waste. I love that one, by the way, because I feel like that's a great opportunity for them to talk to a peer success coach or mentor, is to kind of create their own individualized path. And then it has made me feel how underprivileged I am compared to my peers. And many of you probably know who work with first generation students and marginalized students, underrepresented students, that these conversations come up in our offices as well in all sorts of ways about, and it's really about sense of belonging as well. So how do we get to that in multiple ways? I should say some of the other topics of the course included like financial literacy and mental health. And so I think bringing students to talk about that. We were lucky to have a student in the class who was a first year, who was working at Sokoloff Miller, who presented on financial literacy and how to make a budget. And that ended up being one of the most popular classes. I happened to be sick that day, and so someone else had to stand in for me. But students said that they had never thought about putting together a budget before. And if anything else, I would bring them in sooner into my class, because in terms of the dining plan, students really struggled with that in their first semester. And as I've been going, because there's the intersection of Penn State and first gen, I am learning what are the challenges for these students. So something was brought up in a session earlier today about those first schedules out of NSO, and that sometimes students think whatever they, for me, I'm going to change it a little bit for what I experience. Those schedules they get, they feel like they have to persist through them rather than use the drop ad. And so that's one of the things the students that really had challenges the first semester in terms of academics. It was a consistent theme that they were set up that in a way that wasn't right for them in terms of classes, but they also felt like they needed to persist, which sounds like first gen students, right? Like, I just have to get through this. And some of those students who experience the challenges have also stepped up to say they would like to mentor, because they have lots of things to share with how they would do things differently. So that's one way how it's organically growing, is students that have been helped by the program are now wanting to help others. And this is most recently seen in this first generation committee that I started in the college, in which we have students, faculty, and staff who they themselves are first gen and have an interest in supporting other students that are first gen. So we started in the fall of 2022, and we put together for National First Gen Day a speaker to come to our college who is a lawyer. And she came in to speak, and she also connected with one of the first years in that course and is now an alumni mentor for that student who is pre-law. And so that goes back to that relational thing. And the student knew about it because she was in the class, right? So kind of all those intersections coming together. And then when I came back in January, I met with the committee again, and they had brought up some ideas to do in the spring, but I noticed that we only had like 3 students on the committee. So I put out another call for students to join the committee and receive 14 more interested students. a couple of those students were in that first year cohort, again, that were part of the class and even stepped up to be leaders in putting together our most recent event, which was last night, where we had a first gen social mixer, and we had about 45 people show up that were staff, faculty, and students, primarily undergraduate students that showed up to get to know one another. And it was really great to see students approach their faculty members and say things like, I didn't know you were first gen. And so out of this is sort of just this dynamic that is growing, in which a student may first get to know about the Chaiken Center or about their own first gen identity through our mentorship, through the peer success coaches in the center. And then now organically they're connecting with other people. So going forward, I'm thinking about how that mentorship will still be a part of what we do. Could we scale it up to make it a first gen mentorship program? Because of some of the student leaders that have come forward and who are very passionate about this. So this has all been sort of a growing upon one another. And even though it started out as one thing, I think the mentorship component really was about creating these relationships and seeing the power of the relationships of a mentorship kind of program. So with that, I know we're ending a little early, so I hope there's a lot of questions. But I hope that I put some fodder out there for people to ask about.
Okay, well, there are quite a few questions in Whova, and I'm just going to do it sorted by the upvotes. So if you see a question that you really want to have answered, please hit the thumbs up on it, so that way it shows up across. The first question that I have is, do you have any best practices to share on training peer mentors? What resources would you or do you utilize to help them?
Yeah, actually it was in my notes and didn't mention it, but I have used a program called Eduology, and it says it's a peer mentoring course, but it has coaching techniques as well that it teaches. It is fairly expensive. It's $99. It's a self-paced course that the students go through. It takes about 8 to 10 hours to go through. So it's, it's one of those things that someone put it together. It works. It has all of the resources in it. There's videos. There's also a whole handbook or workbook that comes with it that you can print out and have on hand, or they can keep electronically as a resource. But I know sometimes going to other resources can seem like expensive and not worth it, but I would say that it has a value, because everything you're going to go looking for that you need is probably in that program anyway. So you can spend your time sort of piecemealing and copying stuff off, and at the end of the day, that's the best, at least to get it off the ground. And then the other thing I would say, and maybe Michelle can speak to this too, it's ongoing training. So like they have a student that they meet with, and either they meet with them and then afterwards talk to me and say, this is what went on, what should I do next? Or did I do that right? Or they'll pull me out into the center and have me work with the student along with them. And so it's an ongoing thing. They share with each other how they've worked with students and share those practices as well. So, I mean, training is never done in some ways, but I did like the way of just sort of hitting it off the ground with just some basics about working with other students. And then they do get a certificate for the course at the end of it as well.
So how do you determine who is admitted into the Chaiken program? What do you think other colleges can do to start programs like this or expand current programs to other colleges?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of luck. I am not gonna lie. I think it's no hyperbole to say that I have the best donors in higher ed. The Chaikens were the philanthropists of the year last year. The Chaiken Scholarship has grown. Its criteria starts with Pell eligible, then in-state, and then we do first gen, and obviously academic criteria too. So we're looking, I think that has changed a little bit, or loosened a little bit as we increase the number of scholars. but historically it's been fairly high GPAs. I think this last cohort, we went below what we were used to, which also is an interesting problem opportunity to have, is that we know that we need to support those students in different ways than we had previously, but also we have an opportunity to give these students a chance and show their potential. The scholarship program does not have an application. I work with our scholarship awards person to really just go through a list of students that fit the criteria. We try to keep a balance in all sorts of ways, in gender and race and all of those things, and we do our best to put together. I should say, I mean, it's very recent that we've increased the amount of scholars in our second, third, and fourth year. It used to only be first year scholars, but now the donors have given us enough to add second, third, and fourth scholars, which has been just a joy to give students, as they're going on and things become more expensive, the scholarship. But at this point, there's no other application process. So as far as starting something like this, like talk to the people, your AR&D, and tell them about what these donors are doing and how impactful it is. That would be one of the things, because I think we do need to think about these particular students and how we're going to support them financially at Penn State.
Sure. And speaking about finances, the next top question is about peer mentors and how are they compensated for their time?
Sure. They're also very lucky, right, Michelle? They are paid as peer success coaches, and we pay $15 an hour. So it is a professional job that we expect them to show up and put that value of $15 an hour to work. I think that will make it difficult for scaling up, which is one of my worries or challenges if I wanted to do more. Next year's first year cohort will not be as big, so that will allow us to keep our amount of mentors at where they are as for the Chaikens. But if we want to upscale in terms of first generation mentors, that might be different. Although I'm encouraged by our first generation students have joined the committee, who are super enthusiastic and have suggested themselves to want to just be mentors. And so if we do something like that informally, I don't know exactly what that will look like yet or how I can compensate them.
Sure. In your experience so far with the program, have you run into any barriers or resistance, whether that's with mentor-mentee involvement, institution or department buy-in, et cetera?
Michelle, you're smiling.
Yeah, I can answer as far as the student engagement. At the very beginning, it was very difficult to navigate the situation, only because I personally was not a mentor before to a group of students like this. So it was hard to understand how to reach out to students, because, for example, I would have them join the group me. So they saw the message, they joined the group me, but they wouldn't respond. So that was a little bit difficult at first, but after a while, you kind of just learn to understand that some students are going to be more engaged than others. But as long as all of them are doing what they need to do, that's really what's most important. So even the students who weren't as engaged, they were still submitting their assignments, they were still coming to the class and everything. So that's kind of how I overcame that barrier, just understanding that not every student is going to be the same in terms of communication. So that's the biggest barrier I think that the mentors faced.
Sure. Next question I think is pretty straightforward. This is just for students at University Park, is that correct? Or is it open to students at so it's University Park?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Next question is about, have you explored the residential aspect of student success for the first gen students in this program? Have you encountered any issues with students that are living on campus, for example, and maybe adjusting with that?
I mean, Michelle probably can speak to that too, in terms of the mentors. I would say that's a huge aspect of what is powerful about peer mentoring is the social, emotional, those kinds of transitional things. So I'll let Michelle.
Yeah, I mean, once again, it's really that connection where we've all gone through these similar experiences. So many of the students, many of the mentees have expressed, whether it be just getting used to life on campus and like, wanting to go back home since they are, in their first semester or second semester at this point. They've expressed that. They've also expressed like conflict with their roommates that they've had. So it has been a journey to kind of understand like what is the best way to go about it. So obviously, we know of the different options. Communicate with your roommate, or if it's really that bad, then understand how you can, get switched. But we kind of, overall, in my opinion, I think the goal is to teach the mentees how to handle like conflict resolution, not so much run away from their problems, but okay, what is the problem? Is there a deeper problem within the situation, and how can we fix it?
That is great. And this next question, I'm actually going to combine two of them because I know you kind of talked about this a little bit, Patty. Can you talk about the hiring / application process for the mentors? And maybe Michelle, you can talk about it from your perspective as well. Are they hired by the university? And then kind of the training process for them going through and getting ready to build these skills.
So this is my first set of peer success coaches that were hired last spring. And I really just put together a description and put out the calls for the Chaiken Center to hire these students. They started in the spring. They were hardly working after they went through background checks. They were really up and going in February. We were even actually in a different space. We came to a bigger space in Sparks. We kept the same 6. And actually, I don't even remember, Michelle, when I dropped the bomb that I was going to have you guys be mentors or ask you to be mentors. They had signed up to be peer success coaches in the center, and they were trained through that geology course. And it was a new thing when they stopped in the fall, and I asked them, they are all Chaiken Scholars, so that was a little bit of an easier sell to say, these are your incoming Chaiken Scholar peers. Do you want to be a part of their transition? I'll let Michelle answer how she was asked or told.
Yeah, well, the way that I found out about the position was just through the liberal arts newsletter. So I saw it, I applied. The interview process was, pretty good, just like any interview would be. As far as the training, I think it was really beneficial because there were a lot of detailed examples of like, different scenarios and things with students. But as far as mentoring itself, because that was to be a peer success coach. So to be a mentor, it's actually really interesting because being a peer success coach, it was a brand new position. I wasn't taking over for somebody else. There was never anyone to, have as an example. So with time, we saw the changes of what our position entailed. And, I see it as a good thing because at the beginning, how was Patty supposed to know exactly what was going to happen in the future, what was going to work, what wasn't? So it's been a really interesting journey to see the position go from what it was when I was first hired up until now, and the projection of what it's going to be for, the future peer success coaches. So overall, I think it's just been a work in progress. And I think that the mentorship aspect has been a really good addition because the harder part is during the fall semester, so it's not a year-long thing, but then it also really gives us something to do within both semesters. In the spring, we still are able to check up on the students and everything. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to combine 3 questions into one because they're all on a similar topic. And that topic is assessment. So Patty, you shared one of the pieces of assessment that you received with some of the student feedback. So can you talk about maybe some of the measurable things that you've been able to get from your assessment and how you're able to determine which interventions are effective or not? And then following up with specifically on retention and GPA, because we know that's such a challenge for those early first-gen populations. How you have seen through the assessment, this program linked to those success factors.
Wow, that's a large question. So we have been trying to hit assessment in multiple ways, and Nicole probably has been on this journey with me too, in terms of us thinking intentionally about assessment. I will kind of take on the mentorship part first. I feel like we're still in it, and I plan to assess at the end of this semester those same students about what their feelings were first semester. Did they stay in touch? I can look them up as far as GPA. So that's something that I can do this summer and do that analysis to see what our baseline is, since it's the first time we're creating really a baseline, right? Because we don't know if it helped or didn't help, because it's the first time. I also have, I've had the help of some graduate students that have been doing some data mining around participation in internships and study abroad, which is a particular interest of mine. And so we're starting to pull data on those rates of participation in the College of Liberal Arts of those students. And to no surprise, but again, to be able to make the case, you know, the first thing that we've seen is like, it was, I think, from 2017 to now. So we tried to get pre-pandemic to after pandemic, participation rate was about 14%. So out of like 1,300 internships, 177 were first time. Not surprising, but exactly the thing that I want to get at, because yes, GPA and retention, however, also a commitment to getting them a job or going on to graduate school. And I do think those things are interlinked, right? Like if we can help them be successful along the way and make those connections to those internships and study abroad and those communities that have other mentors to help them academically, like their faculty, then I feel like that's probably going to get to retention. We right now don't even have an institutional research person, but when we get a new one on board, I had started with our previous one looking at retention, and we'll go back to that and also tease out some of those things. But for now, what's been really, for me, targeted is to increase the participation rate in out of classroom experiences by making them aware of them in the beginning. One of our peer success coaches did a workshop on undergraduate research, like, and how to apply for that, because she's done some summer stuff. Michelle has done an embedded program and now can speak to students about the value of we have an embedded program, which is for study abroad. They take a class and they do a short study abroad experience over spring break or fall break. But I've sort of been laser focused on that in terms of high impact practices. After going to the Summer Institute for Equity last summer and watching a session about those kinds of things, there's about how it impacts these students, underrepresented students, exponentially. So if you give the same number of internship opportunities or study abroad to underrepresented versus their peers, you're going to see them be even more successful than their peers. And that just blew my mind. So I feel like as I go forward, I've been more focused on that than the retention. Chaiken Scholars, generally, historically, we have retained them. It's been a pretty high retention rate, but that has also been connected to the small number of select students we've been choosing, in which their GPAs were high and predicted GPAs were high going in. But as we increase the number of scholars, we definitely need to think about keeping an eye on that in terms of retention. So that was a large answer, but
it was a large question. Yes, absolutely. Okay, last question that we have here was asked actually like right at the midpoint. So you've hinted at this as well throughout, but what advice would you give others that want to start a similar program?
So I think the message I really want you to go away with today is look around and see what structures are in place for you already in your department or in your college that you can either expand or leverage, right? So when I came into the Chaiken Center, it was a blank slate. No one gave me particular goals of retention. No one said you need to accomplish this, but I looked around and I said, okay, we had just started an LA 83 program. Our director of academic advising, Greg Nolan, had piloted LA 83 transition course, first year seminar. And I was like, actually, he suggested you could do one for the Chaiken Scholars. And I said, what a great idea, right? When I also think about partnerships. So like I partner with Career Enrichment for many things in terms of getting resources in front of students about professional opportunities and professional development. And in fact, because I do have awarding ability myself and funds for awarding. I had asked them to put on their career enrichment application a box for first gen and Chaiken Scholar, in which students are now checking, and they are awarded first in career enrichment, and then they come to me so I can top off awards. And I think to look at the systems that you have in place, what's working, who are the partners that you have already, where do you have student workers already, student leaders in your college? Make a call out for those first gen students, because I was actually taken aback about how passionate these students were for planning this mixer that we had, which we had like 45 people show up for, and all of the students that were leading it are super passionate, and they took a lot of the responsibility for leading that event. So be persistent in asking too. I asked more than once, does anybody want to be on the first gen committee? And now we have 31, and I say no to no one, because it allows all of us to be together. If someone can't show up, there's still 10 people there at that meeting. And it's been powerful to get students, faculty, and staff together. That would be the other thing that you can do.
Great. So as we are coming up on our time, I know we're a little bit over. Thank you all for being panelists on this presentation on building a first-gen community. For attendees, please rate the session in Whova. You can find the description, the presentation, the questions that were asked all in Whova as well. And enjoy the rest of the First Gen Summit. Thank you all.